So thanks for everyone for attending my talk this afternoon. I'm really proud to be able to share my experiences with burnout with the DevOps Days community here today. So I think this talk is going to be useful for those of you who are suffering from some burnout symptoms, but I also think it's going to be useful for people who have maybe not yet experienced burnout. And my aim with sharing this story is to share some tips on how to improve your mental health in the workplace, and also to generally talk about burnout and raise awareness of the condition itself. So I thought I'd start by introducing myself. My name's Ali Hill, and I currently work as a QA and continuous delivery consultant based in Edinburgh for ECS Digital. So ECS Digital are gold sponsors of this conference, so if you want to come and speak to us, you can find us at our stand in the breaks and at lunch. So my job title is a bit of a mouthful, but I'm essentially a consultant SDET or automation engineer. So I've been testing for just over 5 years now, and I started off as a games tester and then gradually moved into a more agile testing role and learned how to code and learned how to automate tests. And it was this drive to sort of continually learn new tools and technologies and techniques that led me down the path of burning out. So the story I'm about to tell today occurred with my previous employer, and it occurred a couple of years ago. So superheroes in comic books and movies such as Iron Man here are usually positive. They fly in and they save the day when it looks like all hope is lost, and they allow daily life to continue as normal. So here's an image of Iron Man using his skills to save the day once again. But being a hero isn't always sustainable. As you can see with Iron Man in this picture, he's completely crushed, and he's probably taken on more than he can handle, and he's tried to save the day one too many times. So what do I mean when I talk about a hero to describe people in a software development context? The person's usually regarded as a savior within the team. They usually are called upon by managers or peers when an emergency situation arises in production. They often produce a temporary fix to a dire situation, but they allow business to continue as usual. They also crave attention and recognition from their peers and leadership. They love the feeling of being recognized for going above and beyond, and it's addictive to them. And they can also usually be found working long hours into the evenings and weekends, whether they're working to get a release over the line or to fix an emergency situation. But they'll also complain that they can't take annual leave or they can't take holidays or sick days because of the role that they're performing. And they're also often regarded as a fountain of knowledge within the product or the area that they're working on. They love being the go-to person when an emergency situation arises, but they also never document or share their knowledge out with these emergency situations. So what are the problems with having a superhero in your team? They do tend to have some great skills. For example, they can pinpoint the root cause of a problem in high pressure and emergency situations. But relying on superheroes or heroes definitely causes problems for teams. So symptoms or causes of problems are often temporarily alleviated rather than a permanent fix being put in place. So if the immediate problem's been fixed, then the hero can often be seen walking away from the problem without further diagnosing the problem and putting a permanent fix in place, because it's no longer a priority to them or to the management team. It leads me on to my next point. If you've got a hero in your team who can jump in at the last minute to fix an emergency problem, then where's the motivation to fix something longer term? Why should we bother fixing the root cause? But then what happens if this person's off sick, they're on holiday, or they decide to leave the company because they burn themselves out? So for me, the problem with heroes is they aren't good team players. They fly in and they save the day, but they don't leave anything sustainable behind. They can save the company money in the short term by fixing an emergency problem, but I think the over-reliance on one person definitely causes more problems than it solves in the long run. So now that I've described what I believe a hero is and the problems that come with having a hero in your team, I need to confess that I used to be one of these heroes myself. I used to act this way. But what did that mean for me? It meant that I was working long hours. I lost count of the number of times that a manager would come to my desk at 4:30 p.m. and ask me to jump on an emergency problem in production. And I knew at that point that it was going to be a case of me working long into the evening. I also had to work weekends quite frequently to either push final releases over the line at the last minute or to help migrate a critical database that was falling over in production. And in a similar vein, when I booked time off or when I was off sick, I was often phoned by colleagues who were in a panic because they needed something tested or they needed to know how something worked, and only I knew how to do that. So being asked to work from home when you phone in sick is not a great position to be in. My quality of work also decreased because even when I moved on to a new project, I was continuously asked to help out with the project that I was working on before because I hadn't had time or the willingness to share the knowledge that I had gained from the previous project. And this created risks because I constantly had to context switch between multiple projects. And Gloria Mark, who was a researcher at University of California in Irvine, found that computer programmers take around 25 minutes to jump back into the original task after they've context switched. And that's if they ever get back onto that task at all. So that just shows the impact that unplanned firefighting work can have and the risks that if you've got a hero in your team, the risks that they have when they're performing their work. So why did I do it? It's not meant to be used as an excuse as to why I performed this role. I just did a lot of self-reflection when I was preparing for this talk. And these are the reasons I think that I performed the hero role, even though I now realise how damaging it is to the culture in workplaces. So first of all, I was extremely passionate about my work. I wasn't just spending extra hours on critical work projects or fixing bugs or testing bugs and getting releases over the line. I was working on new technologies, new skills, and new tools that I knew could make me a better software tester. I was setting myself ridiculously high targets when it came to learning how to be a better programmer and how to expand my testing skills. And I obviously really enjoyed the work that I was doing, but in hindsight, I was spending far too much of my time doing it and neglecting the time that I should have been spending with friends and family or relaxing at evenings and weekends. I also really enjoyed the recognition and rewards that I was receiving for acting as a hero within the team. I actually got nominated for a company award whilst I was acting like a hero because I was working long hours to get the job done. And also received monetary incentives such as Amazon vouchers for doing overtime. And this opens up a whole new debate about how managers and leaders can feed into this hero culture and lead to people burning out, but I'm not going to go into that just yet. I also cared too much about what my colleagues were doing. I constantly compared myself to others, and if other people in the team were getting promotions or were getting recognised with rewards or awards, then I wasn't happy unless I was getting the same recognition and the same awards. And I also compared myself to more people in more senior roles. So if someone more senior than me was doing a specific task that I thought, oh, that makes them look great, then I would aim to do that as well. And so I was kind of performing almost two jobs at once. So eventually, by exhibiting these behaviours, I nearly burned myself out completely. It didn't happen overnight, because burnout is described as a slow, insidious process that can often take a long time to manifest itself. So I'm going to discuss what burnout was like for me, but first I thought I'd cover an actual definition of what burnout is. So psychologists Freudenberger and North produced this 12 stages of burnout model in 1985, and they describe in a sliding scale the symptoms that come with burnout. So I don't want to go through all of the points on this slide here, but basically, as I said, it's a sliding scale. So at the top, you're bursting with energy. You want to give 100% to your work, and this is the ideal state that you want to be in. But then you begin pushing yourself harder. You seek perfection. You begin to sacrifice your relationships with friends and family, and the time spent practicing your hobbies or doing the things that you enjoy doing to relax begin to get sacrificed for work projects. You then begin to suffer mental health issues such as stress and depression. You become isolated, and you become demotivated at work, and your self-esteem hits an all-time low. And by point number 12, burnout has taken complete hold of you. You need to change something in order to get out of this rut. So on the scale here, as I've described, burnout doesn't differ from mental health issues such as depression. And I don't think that when I was suffering from burnout that I hit rock bottom, but I definitely became demotivated at work, and I did reduce my social interactions with friends and family. I was spending less time relaxing. I focused on work rather than spending time with the people that I cared about. And I'm still too scared to ask my friends or family whether they noticed a change in my behaviour during this period, but I definitely wouldn't rule it out. So, why is it so important to discuss burnout? When I was preparing for this talk, I read the self-help book, How to Stop Worrying and Start Living by Dale Carnegie. And in one of the chapters, there's a case where someone decided to move from working 7 hours a day to working 15 or 16 hours a day in order to reduce the time that this person had to worry about life. And the book was published in 1948, and it sold millions of copies. So if that was the advice that was given out at this time, then is it any wonder that this generation, suffers from burnout just now? So nearly 60% of workers in the tech industry answered yes when they were asked if they were suffering from burnout. And these results were from a survey conducted by a workplace community app called Blind, and it was published in May 2018. 11,500 people from the tech industry responded to these questions. The best performing company in the Blind app were Netflix, and even then 40% of their employees answered yes when they were asked if they were suffering from burnout. So that's a really high number. In terms of business cost and monetary cost and people cost, 46% of HR leaders believe that up to 50% of their employee turnover is caused by burnout. And this is from another survey carried out by a company called Kronos. Over 10% of HR leaders believe that over half their employee turnover is caused by burnout. In terms of the wider social aspects, the US healthcare market spends between $125 and $195 billion a year annually on workplace stress. And it's also estimated to cause 120,000 deaths in the US per year. So these statistics, to me, when I first saw them, were shocking. Burnout's likely to affect people you know, which is why I believe it's so important to discuss it, especially in our industry. So what was burnout like for me? First of all, I was stressed. I never felt at ease at work when I felt like I was suffering from burnout. I had too much work to do, I didn't have enough time to complete it, and due to my previous eagerness to impress and the hero that I was acting as, I found that a lot of work that I'd committed to within this phase was now coming to a head at once, and it led to me feeling overwhelmed. Previously, I was extremely enthusiastic about the work that I was doing, but at the point of burning out, I couldn't care less about my day job. I would do the bare minimum work, and I dropped all personal projects that I was doing outside of work. I was constantly procrastinating in the office, and I couldn't wait to get out and go home. But the work I was doing hadn't changed, so this was definitely a problem with me. My work relationships also suffered quite badly. I was no longer connecting with the people that I'd previously forged good relationships with, and I would turn down any offers of collaboration and opportunities to learn new things because my motivation had suffered so much. And the last main symptom for me was physical as well as mental. I really struggled to sleep properly during the week because I was dreading going into work so much because I was so demotivated, and I knew that something was wrong. It also reduced the quality of my work because I was no longer performing at my best due to being tired, as well as the mental issues that were coming with the burnout. But the story's not all doom and gloom. The good thing about burnout is that, for me anyway, it was solved once I realised that is what my problem was, and that was what was causing my symptoms. But my burnout was self-diagnosed. I didn't get to the point where I needed to seek professional help, but I did see tweets about it within the tech community, and I hadn't heard of it before then, so I just assumed that I was going through a rough patch at work. And this is why I think it's so important to speak about it today. So our industry often demands that we work long hours to meet deadlines, and we need to continuously learn, and we need to have people on call to solve critical issues that happen in production. So how can we prevent ourselves from burning out? So I'm going to cover some of the actions that I took to recover from burnout and to begin to get myself out of the rut that I had got myself into. So the first tip sounds really obvious, but don't do too much. As I mentioned previously, I used to do a lot of overtime to aid the company that I was working for. But then this became expected of me. So resetting that expectation became really difficult. But at the same time, I used to commit to a lot of extracurricular work-related activities, such as speaking at local meetups or conferences, which is quite ironic. But this put a lot of pressure on me outside of work. And I was also setting myself unreasonable targets on personal projects. I was committing myself to watching 2 hours of Pluralsight or online videos about tech every night, which now is such a crazy target to set myself when I'm working a full day. And we all know that sometimes our industry demands us to work overtime. I think it's normal in any job every now and again. But I began to say no to overtime and only do it when it was absolutely necessary. And when you take days off sick, off sick or as a holiday, you've got to remember that nobody is irreplaceable, and the company isn't going to fall apart because you've taken a week, 2 weeks, or even a couple of days off sick. I recently read the book Extreme Programming Explained by Kent Beck, and one of the extreme programming principles is that of the 40-hour week. So in this, Beck explains that teams who have to work more than 40 hours for more than 2 weeks in a row is showing a serious problem with the way that the team is performing, because you can't produce your best work when you're tired due to overtime. So I now kind of try and stick to that rule of not doing more than 1 week's worth of overtime in a row. So this one's quite difficult, but you have to learn to say no to managers or colleagues who are frequently asking you to take on critical tasks or asking you to work long hours. I realised that this, for me, was an extremely privileged position to be in. I had a good relationship with my manager, but I know it's not always as easy just to say no to your management team. But it's also difficult because when I was burning out, I was comparing myself to others. So when I saw people in the office till 7 or 8 o'clock at night, I felt like I wasn't doing as much work or as good a job as they were. But by leaving work on time and saying no to unreasonable or unnecessary requests, I actually think you're setting a good example for your colleagues by doing this. Quite a big problem just now with Slack and email so easily accessible on our phones is that it's so easy to stay connected to work even when we're not meant to be working. So I've personally got Slack on my phone, but I have the notifications turned off outside of normal working hours. And it means I've actually got to go in and make a conscious decision to check my Slack messages outside of those hours, so I'm not going to get notified because someone tags me in a message at 8 o'clock at night. But I think it's quite important to not be sitting on the couch or lying in bed checking work messages or emails, because it can blur the lines between work and personal life. I also think it's important to set yourself reasonable goals. I had to recalibrate my personal goals when I realised that I'd burnt myself out. So instead of aiming to do 2 hours every night of watching Pluralsight videos or practicing new technology, I changed that to spending 2 hours a week as a base goal. If I felt like it, then I could do some more learning at the weekend or do longer. But I still set myself a goal, but I made it much more reasonable. Obviously in our industry, it's important that we continue to learn, but I think there's a balance between setting yourself reasonable goals and pushing yourself too hard so that you end up losing motivation in what it is you're trying to learn. So currently at ECS just now, we get 1 week out of every 4 to focus on learning new technologies and new tools outside of our day-to-day job. And this really relieves the pressure that I feel like that I put on myself, because I'm able to keep up industry trends within working hours. So I've seen companies offer about 25% off your week or whatever to have the time to learn. I think that's a great initiative that more companies should be doing. I also think it's important to plan your work. Sounds like a basic thing, but when you've got a list of what you're planning to tackle on that day, and if you get asked to do any work outside of that list of prioritized tasks, then you can question how that impacts the team, how that impacts your day, and how it compares in priorities with what you've planned to do already. So obviously tools such as Trello are useful for having a personal Kanban board to prioritize your work. But I think it's better just to have a notebook right in front of you that you can list your tasks that you want to tackle for that day or that week ahead. I think the problem for me with Trello and electronic tools is you need to make an active decision to actually go in and look at that on your browser. But if you've got a notepad right in front of you on your desk, then it's always there and you can always look at it. So planning my day more effectively definitely improved my output at work because it allowed me to focus on the tasks that I'd planned in advance. So I think this one's really important and underrated for people who aren't in management roles. But when you're extremely passionate about the work you are doing and you get asked to do it, you begin to question whether you should be asking someone else to do this work or saying that you're too busy because you're the person that's been asked. So surely you're the best person to take that task on and get that work done. But what I learned to do was if I was already swamped with work and had a busy day ahead, then I would suggest the work to another person who I knew could do this task. And it helped improve my colleague relationships because it showed that I trusted them, whereas before I would keep all the work myself and just do it. It helped me enable the team that I was working with to learn new skills as well. I want to differentiate between sharing knowledge and documentation. So I used to believe that an effective way of sharing knowledge would be to write a massive process document once I'd finished the task that I was testing, for example. But this obviously isn't the case. I think big documents, especially for more junior members of the team, can be quite intimidating, especially if they've never worked on the project before. It's much more manageable to pair up with the people that you want to share knowledge with, so you can tackle the problem together and work on it together. Let the person that you're sharing the knowledge with explore the product or the area or whatever it is you're developing and learn together. And obviously documentation is useful, but nothing beats tackling a problem together in order to gain a shared understanding. I think I needed to start listening to my own needs. This included things like taking lunch breaks and any other allocated breaks that I was getting at work. I used to sit at my desk, eat my lunch, but continue to work. But I think I found it I was so much more productive in the afternoon when I disengaged from the work that I was doing. And sometimes this just meant browsing the internet instead of having work open. But even more useful is even going for a walk when the weather's good, which isn't that common here. But and also take regular coffee breaks, even if it's 10 minutes away from your machine. It really helps you disengage from the work you're doing and tackle the problem with a fresh mindset. So another thing is regular amounts of sleep. So I really need my 8 hours sleep. I know it's not the same for everyone, but when I couldn't sleep due to feeling burnt out, I think it was the mixture of the different hours of sleep that I was getting that really led to me feeling tired and not motivated. So I think getting the same amount of sleep every night really helps, keeping your sleep pattern consistent where possible. And I also think, going back to the reasonable goals point, if you're sitting at home thinking you should be doing some personal project or learning a new skill or new technology, but watching Netflix or something is more appealing, then that's okay sometimes. Sometimes you really aren't in the mood to do some learning after a full day at work. And if you force yourself to do it, it might not be a productive session anyway. So you might not want to be making a habit of procrastinating on your personal projects, but you do need to learn to give yourself a break every now and again. You also need to believe in yourself. So a large part of burnout for me was having a low self-esteem and suffering from imposter syndrome. I was searching for a constant need for recognition from my peers and leadership teams. But sometimes you need to look back at what you've achieved over the past few months or the past year or the past few days even, in order to reassure yourself that you're really good at what you do. So I decided to store all of my achievements in a notepad document so that when I was having a bad day, I could look back at these and feel better about myself. As well as this being a good tool to combat low self-esteem, it was also really useful when it came to end-of-year reviews because I had all of the evidence of all the good tasks that I'd taken on. So we all get criticised at work from time to time. And what was important for me was that I didn't take these criticisms to heart. It was important for me to put my professional relationships and work into context. And criticisms, as long as they're constructive, are a really good way to learn and improve, even though it doesn't feel like it at the time. It's also important to have your own support network. Meeting up with friends and family on a more regular basis has definitely helped me. And it's good to meet up with the people that you care about because it puts your professional life into perspective. There are definitely things out there more important than work, even though it doesn't feel like it all of the time. So the top 3 causes of burnout, according to that Kronos survey that I mentioned earlier, are an unfair compensation package, too much overtime, and an unreasonable workload. So these causes of burnout are all within companies' and organizations' control. But companies need to be honest and proactive about the issue. Office culture plays a large part of playing into a burnout culture and feeding that hero culture. And you often hear people bragging about programming until the early hours of the morning or being in the office at 5 a.m. And this can lead to others, especially newer people in the team, copying that behavior because they think it's what's expected of them and they think it's the norm. So as I mentioned, I used to get rewarded and recognized for working ridiculously long hours. And understand that every now and again we do need to go above and beyond in terms of the hours that we work. But rewarding hero behavior can lead to people continuing to behave this way because they're getting constantly recognized for it. So as an example, someone in my last job was nominated for an employee award, and in their nomination it had the phrase, "sleep is for the weak." So that's not healthy or productive for any work team. And by potentially rewarding this employee with a big award, you're reinforcing that this is the culture you would like to promote within your company. So my advice would be to try and tackle the root cause of the problem. And when a team has to do overtime or someone has to jump on a critical issue, try and prevent it from happening again. Have a plan in place. Don't leave a temporary solution in place and fix the true problem. And this can help your team move away from having a hero culture. So how have the actions I took helped my life to become better and for me to be happier? I now have a much better work-life balance. For the most part, I've clearly differentiated between work and personal life. Still not perfect, but I'm getting there. And it means I have more time to do the things I enjoy doing, even if it's just lying in front of the television after work or watching football. And by the same token, I've got time now for friends and family, and I've rebuilt these close relationships that I had with the people that I care about in my personal life. And I see them a lot more frequently than I used to. I'm also nowhere near as stressed as I used to be. So I'm a bit of a stress head in general, but by having more time to relax and by not doing loads of overtime, I'm giving myself more time to chill out. And by not agreeing to do overtime or work late into the evenings, I now have more energy to put into learning the skills I'm passionate about and will become useful to me personally and my career in the future. And I think there's a big differentiation there in doing work because your company needs it and doing work that will benefit you in your own time. But I'm learning skills for myself and not necessarily to meet a deadline that the company needs. So the quality of my work has also improved because I'm no longer context switching. And if I plan my day properly, then I'm doing one thing at a time and I'm using my notepad and prioritized list to help me. So overall, I'm in a much happier place and I'm no longer acting as a hero that I thought people needed. So it's a cliche, but life is short, and we need to realize that there's more to life than our jobs, no matter how passionate we are about them. When we look back on our lives, we won't remember the amount of overtime that we've done or worked or the deadlines we managed to meet, but we will remember our achievements. But we're also going to remember the good times that we've had with friends, family, and loved ones. So thank you very much for listening to my talk, and most importantly, remember to look after yourselves.